Hello everyone and welcome to .NET Core Central. In today's video, I am going to talk about Facade Design Pattern. And Facade Design Pattern is also one of the Gang of 4 design patterns. Facade pattern is also one of the structural design pattern. The main intent of this pattern is to provide a unified interface instead of exposing a set of interfaces from a subsystem. Now when we get into the details, it will be a little bit more clear what it means. But one thing to understand in this case, interface literally does not mean just the class interface concept. An interface is any set of interface to a particular subsystem, which can be a service, it can be an interface, and so on and so forth. And the facade pattern defines a high-level interface that makes the underlying service easier to use. So now let's take an example and it will be more clear what I mean by this. And facade pattern is also probably one of the easiest and simplest design pattern out there. And in a lot of cases, we use facade pattern without even knowing about it. So let's take an example. Let's say we have a e-commerce system, and the e-commerce system deals with buying some items. And for buying item, what all do we need? We usually need an inventory system, which is going to be responsible for showing the inventory. And then we would have payment system, which will be responsible for the payment processing. And then finally, we might have a notification system, which is responsible for sending notification. So if we have to do that, what we can do is let's create 3 new interfaces. The first one will be inventory service. For the simplicity, let's consider it is a full-fledged inventory interface which will provide all the functionality of an inventory. But in a real-life scenario, you'll be probably breaking it out into inventory provider versus inventory search versus inventory creator, and so on and so forth. For the time being, let's say we just have an inventory service, and the inventory service is going to have just one method. So let's just have string array. Let's say the inventory string, and just get it returns all the inventory. So that's the inventory interface or the inventory service. And then we can have another service called payment service. So payment service, and this one, let's keep it as internal. And here we can have void pay. This can be double amount, let's say, and string item, the item for which we are paying. And then finally we can have another interface, which is notification service, which is responsible for sending notification. And here it can have just void send. And again, when we write real-time functions for all of these, most of these will be async functions because they will be working with external services, like sending email will be through some email provider. Similarly, getting inventory and saving payment, this will be with some sort of data store, which will be also happening through asynchronous method. But for this example, we are just going to do console write, so I did not create any async method here. Now for the notification service, let's just create the notification class also here. Again, I am putting the class and interface in the same file, but usually we put class and interface in their own individual file. Just for the interest of time and so that we can see the code in same place, I'm putting both of them in one place. And let's implement the interface. And here we can just say So that's the notification service. Similarly, for inventory service, we can have a class. And here we can return let's say we're just returning 2 items, book and pen. And then finally for the payment service, let's similarly create a class. Let's implement the interface, and here so just say paying amount, whatever is the incoming amount for the item which is the incoming item. So it's a very simple implementation just for the demonstration purpose. And now what we can do at this point in time is we can create 3 different controllers. One for payment service, which can be payment controller. So let's do that. So we can create a payment controller, and for that we'll have API retry controller, and we can have a payment controller which will in the constructor will take payment service, and then on the post, and let's delete everything else. Let's say just support post for the time being. This has to be public, so will be all other interfaces, but we can change up later. So string item and double amount. Can have that, and then here what we can do is payment service dot pay, and we can pass the amount and item. So this will be responsible, this service will be responsible for adding payment, and similarly we can add another controller, and this controller also is going to be a controller for notification. So we can have notification controller, and notification controller also will have, let's say, only the post method, and can delete the rest. And here we can create a constructor. We can say notification service, and let's make notification service as public. And then now here what we can say is notification service dot send, and here is the incoming value. So that's the next controller, and the third controller is going to be API read write, and it is going to be for the inventory. So we can create an inventory controller, and in the inventory controller all we need is the get. Can get rid of everything else, and we're going to have inventory service, and let's make it public. And then here we can say return inventory service dot get. Okay, so we have the 3 controller ready. Now at this point in time where we are going to use the facade pattern, consider it that these services are accessed from your web application or a mobile client. What is going to happen is the web application is going to make first a call to get the inventory, and then a call to make a payment, and then a call to send notification. Now the inventory call might be done twice. First time when all the inventory are loaded, second time when someone buys something it will make the inventory call again to verify if the inventory is still there, then make a purchase through payment, and then notification. It causes two issues. The first issue is now the web or the mobile client have to make multiple calls. Secondly, there are too many granular level services exposed to the client. So how do we solve this? This is where the facade pattern comes into place. So we can create something as, we can create a new controller and we can call it as purchase facade controller. Let's add it, and in the purchase facade controller what we can do is, so purchase facade controller now is going to act as a facade to all the other controllers. So instead of calling individual controller, purchase facade controller is going to provide the functionality of purchase, and it is now going to facade all the internal services. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just copy from payment controller because it has both item and the amount already. So let's do that, and then let's add the constructor, and in the constructor we're going to have first I inventory service, I payment service. Let's get it to the next line, and then finally I notification service, and let's add variable for all of them. The next thing here in the post, because it is a facade, first is going to do var is equal to inventory service dot get, and then it will say if inventory dot any so if from the inventory, if none of the item matches to the item not, then return bad request, and let's make it as async result, so it can return a bad request, and then finally let's return okay, so that stop getting the quickly. This should be action result, not async result. And the next thing we are going to do is we're going to pay, and then finally we're going to do notification service dot send notification with the that's the message we are going to send. So now what we did is we created a facade called purchase facade, and now instead of calling 3 different controllers or 3 different web APIs, the client, which is a web application or a mobile application, can just call this facade and do the purchase as a part of single call, and it saves them 3 call. So this is where the facade pattern comes in very handy. Now the next question you might have, well, when we do microservices, the inventory notification payment is not going to be part of the same service. They are probably in 3 different services, and you are absolutely right. They are going to be in 3 different projects, and they will be part of 3 different distinct services. So there are 2 ways to achieve this in case of microservices. The first way to achieve this is the purchase controller itself can be its own service, which it should be, and it is the one which is going to expose this post, and instead of calling these internal interfaces, it will be making HTTP GET and HTTP POST on these 3 services which are hosted in separate microservice altogether, and this can now become a facade service which can be called by client. The other way of doing this is similarly you can use an API gateway, and in the API gateway you can call these services through some sort of orchestration. And I have shown this in one of my previous YouTube video, how you can orchestrate multiple service using step function, and then the step function can be executed from a API gateway. So this is how you can implement facade pattern when it comes to microservices versus semi-monolithic service which has microcontrollers. And as I said at the beginning of the video, this is a pattern you might be using very frequently. It's just that it comes very naturally when you are building services with solid design pattern, or if you are using microservices. If you are using microservices, you will end up having facade service or API gateway to orchestrate your microservices, or facade your microservices. Or if you are using a semi microservice or a mini service which has multiple interfaces which implements multiple responsibility, you might have a facade service or facade controller which talks to these interfaces. So that's all I wanted to cover for this video. And if you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. If you are new to my channel and you think you are getting value out of my channel, please subscribe to my channel. And thanks so much for watching this video.